My name is not important, nor is my birth date or address. What is important to know is that I was once an ordinary being, just like you. The daily exposure to the horror and indecencies performed by society and the human race as a whole can change a man. It changed me. The intrusive rise of world war, poverty, murder, crime, and economic devastation have all somehow twisted the human condition beyond recognition, beyond repair. Now, I call this place home, safe within the confinement of these four walls, to share with you another twisted tale of an otherwise ordinary mind. The summer drive to our family beach house held a melancholy feeling this year. It was going to be 3 months since the disease that eats your brain took Pop-Pop away from my family and me. Mommy said it was Alzheimer's disease. I repeatedly would ask her why this person had to give this bad disease to my Pop-Pop. I hated Alzheimer's. It was the 4th of July holiday and the start to my summer vacation. Mom's job as a high school drama teacher would always delay my official start of summer till late in June. It really didn't matter as much to me this year because my Pop-Pop was gone. I wasn't going to have anyone to go down to the marina with and teach me how to hook a worm onto my fishing pole or to teach me how to master the art of chess. Pop-Pop was going to take me out on the jet skis this year, too. The biggest disappointment for me was that they were supposed to enter the Briar Bay Sandcastle building competition together. I had finally turned 8 years old on Memorial Day and was now eligible to compete in the junior division. We even had chosen the Castle Kings as the name for our team. Mommy even thought that Pop-Pop and I had an awesome chance of bringing home the grand prize. Now I wasn't so sure if that was still true. His unheralded departure had left me to enter the competition all by myself. I knew this was going to be the summer that would propel me towards becoming a man. I had no idea that it would also be the summer I would be the only witness to a series of unexplainable yet deserving murders. The traffic on the Garden State Parkway inched forward as if we were slowly creeping up on the enemy. The record June temperatures was tipping at nearly 100 degrees. It made Earl's custom van swelter like an active volcano. The inside of the green and black striped eyesore resembled a bachelor pad on wheels. There were 2 leather captain's chairs with the rollback massagers draped over them. They acted as bookends for the large red cooler that was filled with beer and boxed wine. It rested under the portable 13-inch black and white television with the dangling wires attached to something called an Atari 2600. I sat on one of 3 beanbag chairs that were lying atop the yellow shag carpeted rear of the van. I was trapped in a living room nightmare. Making my trip even more unbearable was the weird retro music wailing from the factory-installed satellite radio. Things couldn't get any worse. "Hey, Toby, why don't you put down that mini laptop and hand me a can of Budweiser from the cooler?" A mildly intoxicated voice barked at me from the front seat. Things just got worse. That voice was the only thing in the world that could make me cringe from both fear and disgust. It was the voice of Earl Quipple, my stepdad since last Christmas. That was my secret name for the alcoholic, lazy, and more often than not, abusive man that Mom married just 2 days before Christmas. When all of the other children in Haven Ridge were waking up on Christmas morning to beautifully wrapped and carefully stacked toys, I woke up to find Earl. I can go on forever about the moron and how my life with Mom has been turned upside down the past few months, but murder is more exciting. Yes, sir, I stuttered, which I did since I was in the 1st grade. I gave the ice-cold beer a few shakes with my wrist before passing it to Earl. "Jesus freaking, did you see? What the hell did he fling at me? I can't see. Where are you little bastard?" Earl hollered. He was flailing his arms spastically in the air and kept screaming obscenities. My mom pointed at me to go and hide behind the sand dune. "Come on, Earl, we need to get you cleaned up," she ordered. I watched in disgust as they started back down the trail. Earl had his slimy bare torso leaning against my mommy's side. When they were both completely out of my view, I huddled myself against my sand-made friends and began to weep. I can't explain what happened next with any reasonable theory, but my body contoured into the sand. I think they were consoling me. "Did you hear something, Roxy?" Sienna asked. "It sounded like a person screaming. It was coming from over there." She pointed towards the dunes. "Isn't that where the old guy went to check on his little brat?" Roxy giggled. "I'll go and see if everything is all right. You stay here and protect the beer." She bent over to retrieve a beach towel from her designer bag. Roxy wrapped it around her waist. "I sure hope he didn't get devoured by some sand monster," she continued laughing while walking away. Sienna popped the top of the fat-free Pringles and took a sip from her can of beer that had been sitting on ice. She remembered the metal beach chair that she lugged from the trunk of Roxy's VW. It would make for the perfect place to sit and relax. Sienna snapped open the flimsy chair, rested her head against the back, closed her eyes, and waited. Sand monsters, she huffed. I hope they snatch up your bitchy ass. Briar Bay Estates was an upscale beachfront community just north of Cape May, New Jersey, where my pop-pop and daddy built our vacation home before I was born. I always looked forward to my summer vacations here because of the presence I felt. It was like someone else was there with me. I knew it was my daddy. He died at the place where he worked many years earlier after bad men had crashed their airplanes into his building. Every year we would finish our summer vacation with a day trip to New York City, where we would visit the big hole where Daddy's office used to be. Mommy would tell me the wonderful stories about what a well-respected architectural engineer he was. Then, after the smile on her face would disappear, she would always begin to cry. Within minutes, my eyes would be burning and a bloodshot red from my own salty tears. My daddy's name was Stephen King, and I loved him more than anything. Mommy, are we going to see Daddy this year? I asked. Jesus Christ, kid. Can we at least get the summer started before worrying about how it's going to end? Shouted Earl. He turned towards my mom and asked, You didn't tell him? She threw the butt of her cigarette out the window, clipped her hair back from her pale white face, took a swig from her Avion water, and then spouted, Honey, Earl has to get back to work earlier than expected. We are going to have to cut some time off of our vacation this year. I promise I will take you to see Daddy at Christmas time, okay? She smiled. Nora King was a transparent woman whose former beauty had disappeared years earlier when her husband became a victim of 9/11. The once vibrant blonde with a figure that other women paid for was now just a thin, wire-haired female that had given up on life. She never really felt secure without the comfort of a man by her side, regardless of how shitty those men may have been. As long as Nora wasn't alone, then she could live another day. The one thing that Nora neglected to see was the fact that she was never really alone. She always had her son Toby. I could feel my blood beginning to boil. I stopped downloading music from my laptop and threw it onto the floor. There was a thunderstorm of tears rising within my eyes. I was starting to feel dizzy, and my muscles were tightening to the point that I couldn't catch my breath. I was feeling like a child that had been wrongfully scorned and was about to let them have a taste of the worst tantrum I could conjure up. That was until my body suddenly collapsed with that sense of fear and disgust. We're here. Earl whistled through his mouthful of half-rotten teeth. The one thing that Mom and I both hated about my stepdad was that awful addiction to the chewing tobacco. We made a left onto Wave Runner Road and drove all the way to the end of the cul-de-sac. I could just about catch a hint of the saltwater smell through the uncomfortable humidity. Our beach house was the bright yellow ranch with the salmon trim just before the sand dunes that led to King's Beach. My pop-pop named it that after he bought the property back in the 70s. The wooden planks that comprised our front deck were covered with inches of sand that had blown up from the nearby beach. The hideously sunburnt grass was overgrown to the point that you could no longer see the wading pool that was in our front yard. The window sills were covered with the shedding paint chips that had fallen from the decaying shutters caused by the harsh winter winds. There were magazine subscriptions and a colorful array of awkwardly sized envelopes battling for their freedom from the prison of our mailbox. It was all just a minor setback. I knew that my mom would be sure to have everything in order and under control by dinner time. Her severe case of OCD was described by doctors as a post-traumatic stress disorder from my daddy's untimely death. I immediately leaped from the engine-controlled inferno, ran through the tall grass, and headed for the front door. Toby, the winds whispered. It was a pleasure to hear an old friend reach out to me through the subtle breeze. All I could do was smile and turn the key hanging from the sliding metal doors. The next morning I was up bright and early. The entire night I couldn't do anything but toss and turn. Usually the sounds of the waves crashing against the dunes would put me to sleep, but last night was different. Everything was different. The competition was in 1 week, and I needed to get the feel of sand between my fingers as soon as possible. I stood on the front porch with my new bucket and shovel. I screamed through the front screen that led to the living room. Come on, Mom, I need to get started. You go ahead, sweetie. I'll be right behind you. I just want to let Earl know where we'll be. She was headed for the kitchen. There were 2 monstrous sand dunes that overshadowed the trail leading to the ocean waters. I was always afraid to get near the beach alone until my pop-pop told me that the sand was filled with thousands of new friends just waiting to make my acquaintance. He took me by the hand and guided me along the trail, explaining that the towering dunes were really just sand guards protecting all the creatures that lived under the beach. Pop-Pop plowed his fist into one of the guards. It looked like he was punching the mound of sand. When he withdrew his fist, he opened the palm of my hand and slowly poured the fine granules over my skin. Don't be afraid, Toby. If you let yourself become a friend to the sand will protect you. I could hear him say it like it was only yesterday. When I reached the end of the trail, I saw nothing but the glistening tan and white granules resting all along the beach. I stopped to drop my backpack near the large sand dune, extended my right forearm, and shook hands with my old friend. He felt somewhat moist today. I thought to myself that the sand had started crying when they heard about the death of their special friend. I'm sad too, old friend, but I need your help. Toby's powder blue eyes began to dampen. We have to win the sandcastle competition this summer for Pop-Pop, I finished with a wipe of my elbow to clear my nose. What are you crying about, you pansy? Asked Earl. He had crept up from behind me. He was carrying his water shoes in one hand and a 20-pack of Budweiser in the other. Earl also had two beautiful, red-headed women in their 20s dressed in skimpy two-piece bathing suits, tagging along behind him. They were toting some beach chairs and plastic bags stuffed with hoagies and potato chips. Come on, Toby, Earl teased. Get over here and help Roxy and Sienna with their bags, you little pain in the ass. They all just laughed. Where's Mommy? I yelled to Earl as he walked away, still laughing. He only stopped briefly to answer, but it was long enough to make my body begin to shake and spasm with irrepressible anger. Your mom had a minor fall in the kitchen, and she cut her eye. She will be here soon. I knew he was lying. My mom was too precise and meticulous to fall on her own. She had to be pushed or tripped. There had been a few other occasions where she would appear overnight with unexplainable cuts and bruises on her body. It all started ever since Super Dud had slithered his way into my life. I hated him more than I hated Alzheimer's. Sometimes I would lay awake at night and think of different ways that I could kill him for hurting my mommy. I picked up the plastic grocery bags, put my backpack over my shoulder, and continued to the beach. The mild breeze started to increase in speed, and the sand became agitated. It had started to form a cyclonic funnel behind me. I knew that they had been angered by the display of ignorance that Earl had shown towards me. Toby, the winds whispered again. This time I could have sworn that it was my Pop-Pop's soothing voice that I heard. I could see Earl from the location where I had started to build my castle. It was located near the farthest dune. He was entertaining his new group of young friends and becoming quite loud about it. I kept hoping that he wouldn't disturb any of our neighbors. I sat staring from the middle of what was starting out to be my sandcastle's ground floor. I could clearly see all of the other beach houses along the water, some of which were also entering structures into the competition. It appeared that none of the other competitors had even started to prepare. It was getting late anyway. The sun had already started to set over the ocean's back, allowing the cooler temperatures to blow inland. It was the end to this less-than-perfect day. I wasn't able to shake an unsettling feeling inside of my stomach. It felt as though death had blended itself unnoticed within the ocean breeze. I closed my eyes and wished really hard that it would take my stepdad. Toby, would you like a sandwich and some chocolate milk? You're going to need to stay strong for your contest, sweetie, Nora said. Here, I brought you a hoodie to put on. It's getting chilly. She smiled at me. Mom, was all I could say. I jumped up and wrapped myself around her waist. I wanted the moment to last forever, just the two of us. The same way it was before the pile of garbage that was Earl Quipple haggardly stumbled onto our doorstep. It was like that bully Rodney Michaels from school used to say when stealing my lunch money. Nothing lasts forever, pussy. And I was about to find out how true that was. The stale smell of beer and body odor attacked my senses. Earl pulled me by my shoulders and knocked me to the ground. Let me have a little bit of that, son, he slurred. My mommy tried to back away from his sweaty grasp and caught her sandal on a large patch of spinifex grass. She fell backwards onto the heavy sand. I am not your son, dick-face, I screamed without a stutter. My insides were reaching a critical level as the blood coursing through me started to boil. The sand underneath me was also heating up from my body's temperature. The ground felt as if I were lying on top of an overheated car engine. Toby. It spoke to me. I quickly pushed myself up and scooped a fistful of sand into my palms. The plan was to throw it into Stepdad's eyes and run like hell for the beach house. Mom would never let him hurt me. She had stopped him from laying his hands on me before, only to receive the intended slap or punch upon herself. The sand flew from my tiny hands as if they had a mind of their own. I think they did. The particles that were being carried through the air on a direct course with Earl's face had been transformed into a majestic spray of tiny bits of colored glass. Hundreds of them smashed against his rough, unshaven skin. The blood started to trickle slowly from each of the tiny punctures. I just stood my ground and watched as the incinerator within me started to cool.